check with people that they have the timeline ready. And then, so now we're going to move into the process. And let's just take a minute to settle, because I'm going to ask you kind of an important question. So just take a breath, maybe let go of your pencil for just a minute. And just settle in. And I'm going to ask a question, and I just want you to feel into the answer. It's going to be kind of a gentle intuition. And the question is, when do you think you will die or leave this life? And this is not a prediction, okay? It's not, it doesn't mean because we're doing this, it's going to happen then, of course. I just want to reassure you, we're just imagining, and, this might be new to you. Often we don't imagine this. So just take a moment to feel into it and think. You can either look at the timeline in the decades, or you might want to think about the age you think you'll leave and then figure out where is that on the timeline. And write your name above on the top part, somewhere around when you think you'll probably die, just guessing from now. When your life will come to a completion here. And you can, we've told people that you can also, if you want to draw something. Some people are very visually oriented and they like to draw a little symbol by their name or something like that. You can do that. Has everyone found a place on the timeline for themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now is where we're going to, once everyone has written down when they think they'll go and they've indicated on the timeline, we're going to shift back to the book, and we're going to bring the scenario described in the book Choosing Earth into the timeline by reading the summaries of each of the decades of the scenario. And those decades summaries are on pages 41 to 43. And there's a summary of each of the 6 decades. So in a couple minutes, I'll ask for a volunteer, but let me just say a little bit about how we're going to do it. In the past, we did some readings of excerpts and we made comments. This time we won't make comments, and we have a big group. So what I'm going to ask is, when it's time for volunteers, if you volunteer, just read the decade, and that's it. You won't make any comments. And while the reader is reading the summary, the rest of the group will write some notes on the bottom portion of the timeline near that decade. So if we're talking about the 2020s, you can write the notes, in the section between the 2020s and the 2030s. And you don't need to write everything they're saying, of course. Just write down some things that stand out for you and some notes so that you can remember what that decade is about. Just give yourself a feel for it. And the readers, like I said, won't make any comments. They'll just read it. And once the one reader's done, we'll go on to another volunteer for the second decade. So can we have our first volunteer? Who wants to read the 2020s? James, would you please read the summary of the 2020s for us? And everyone else can write a few notes in the timeline.
2020s, recognizing crisis, the great unraveling. This is a decade of widespread awakening to the immediacy, scope, and depth of the great transition. The world is coming apart at the seams. Economic supply chains are being broken. The world economy is decoupling and decentralizing. Breakdowns of institutions are widespread with the disruption of services of all kinds. Political and social chaos is growing. Trust and legitimacy of leadership is declining. Policies lack essential coordination, speed, and depth. Despite growing recognition of a whole systems crisis, many individuals and institutions resist making essential changes, which exacerbates the great unraveling.
Thank you. So if you want to write a few more notes, just take a moment now to kind of remember what that decade is, because you'll be reflecting on it later. And then we need a volunteer for the 2030s. Who wants to read the decade of the 2030s? Dharma?
I'll go. Mhm.
Okay.
Collapsing civilizations, the Great Fall. Climate disruption is the catalyst for a full-blown systems crisis, producing a global financial crisis that fully unravels the world economy and society. A coherent global response is too little and too late to meet rapidly changing conditions. Institutions are overwhelmed with the speed of the world coming apart and the scope of breakdowns and cascading collapse. Chaos and confusion are mounting along with deep social panic and anarchy. The world passes critical tipping points and with a great fall drops into deep disorder and disarray.
You. So again, you can write some notes in the section on the 2030s to recall that decade.
Corinne, we're going through and Coleen is walking us through the actual process we'll be using. So we're in the midst of that. Thanks for coming in. Excuse me.
Thank you for filling me in. I'm getting ready to board a plane. I've been delayed, so I'm gonna just be on mute.
Evelyn, do you want to read the 2040s for us?
Sure. 2040s, into the fire of initiation, the great sorrow. As the consequences of climate chaos, financial breakdowns, civic anarchy, species extinction, mass migrations, and widespread famines continue to grow, the entire world descends into collapse. It is a time of great sorrow and mourning for all that is being lost. The need for a profound transformation is anchored clearly in the raw experience of humanity. We recognize finally that we will either pull together in common effort or face the functional extinction of our species. We also recognize we may have waited too long and our efforts may be in vain.
Thank you. So again, just put a few notes down to recall later what that decade was. And since we're a small group, maybe we could just circle back around. And James, would you do the 2050s?
2050s, a conscious species civilization, the Great Awakening. Pushed to extreme limits by catastrophe, the suffering and sorrow of these times become a purifying fire that burns through remaining barriers to allow a great awakening of the collective mind and soul of our species. In turn, a new pathway emerges more clearly for humanity. We collectively acknowledge the need for a much more conscious species civilization.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not done, wait a minute.
Oh, you're not done?
We
Okay.
collectively acknowledge the need for a more conscious species civilization, grow into our early adulthood, work for broad and deep reconciliation, establish full-hearted communication, cultivate caring communities, and choose lifeways of sustainable simplicity.
Hmm.
preserving the future, choosing Earth. We leave behind the world of the past and turn towards new pathways ahead. There is wide recognition it will take centuries before the Earth's natural systems can recover. Nonetheless, with a new maturity and new consciousness, humanity is choosing Earth and caring for the well-being of all life. After experiencing the reality of widespread collapse, many are growing into more conscious unity with one another and all of life. Although collapse and authoritarianism still remain as potential outcomes, the center of social gravity has shifted toward a healing journey for the Earth. The people of the Earth are working to establish an enduring species civilization for the long-term future.
Evelyn, do you want to read the last one?
Sure. 2070s and centuries beyond. 3 pathways ahead. An open future. We have chosen a new relationship with Earth as a foundation for the future. 3 pathways still remain, but the center of social gravity has shifted in favor of a transformational path forward. The future has not been closed by either complete ruin in the biosphere or by imprisonment in authoritarian structures. Instead, we have an open future and chance to realize a higher humanity and maturity as an enduring planetary civilization. A new journey begins for the ecology of life on Earth. The portrayal of the future that follows is based upon the best scientific estimates available, decade by decade, for the next 50 years across a number of key areas. These are global warming and climate disruption, water scarcity, food scarcity, climate refugees, species extinction, world population, economic growth and breakdown, economic inequities. Where a number of studies focus on a few of these driving trends, my intention is to consider all 8 and explore how they seem likely to interact and unfold over decades, both individually and as an interdependent world system. Because the availability of hard trend data diminishes rapidly as we look further into the future, the early decades, especially the 2020s, are more heavily weighted with scientific data and analysis.
Oh, you know what, Evelyn? I think we've gone further than we needed to. It's just the 70s. So now he's shifting to kind of taking us into it.
Yes.
That's good, because I didn't have the book here. I didn't notice it at first. But when you have them read it, just have them read that 2070s paragraph.
Okay,
and
just the
stop
first
there.
paragraph.
Just the very
Okay.
first one.
Okay,
And then, because the book then goes into the scenario, but we're just using the summaries as a little reminder here.
okay, for the 70s. Okay,
Yep. So good. So now we're going to just take a few moments to look at your notes and take in what you heard, reflecting on the remaining journey of your life through the lens of this timeline. That's part of the activity. So feel into what you put down for the time you have left of your life and look at the timeline and the notes you took and what you heard. You can journal if you'd like to on a piece of paper aside from the timeline. Jot down some notes about what's coming up. What do you feel? what will you experience based on this scenario? So it's kind of like looking at what's left of your life given the scenario, and just kind of staying with the scenario for the moment, whether this is what is going to happen or not, but being with it as that, just see what's coming up for you about the rest of your life, and then take some notes on that. Hey Joyce, we're going through the timeline, just so you know where we're
Okay.
at. And so they have a timeline in front of them, and we just read the summaries of each decade, and they took notes on it. They've also already placed on their timeline, their handwritten timeline, when they think they might be ending this life, dying and leaving this life. So they have a sense of how much longer their journey might connect with what's happening. So that's where we're at right now. We've read the summaries, and they're taking notes on that.
Okay. What page in the book are you connecting with?
Well, it's not so much a book. I have a script here that I'll give you
Oh,
all, and it's in the flow of the session flow chart, you know, that we
Yeah.
have. This is kind of described in summary there, and then we have a handwritten script, and we're also going to give you an outline on it.
Oh,
So
okay.
you'll be able to do it in 2 different ways. So we're about halfway
Oh.
through the timeline activity.
Okay.
So if you want to join us, what you could do is just take a piece of paper and
Mhm.
draw a line in the center of it,
Okay.
in the middle of the paper, all the way across. So it goes right across your paper.
Yep.
And then put the decades from the 2020s to the 2100 and kind of leave space between them, you know, like
Okay.
the 2020, then 2030, leaving a little bit of space, and all the way down till you get 2100 on the other side of the paper. So I think that's eight decades.
So starting at 2020
Yep.
and going to 2100.
2100, 2100, and leaving some space in between that.
Well, it's actually 2110 is the first,
Yeah,
yeah, is the one that you showed us.
yeah. Yeah, let me share that real quick. So Joyce
10.
can see it.
So there are 10 dots.
Yeah, 10, you're right. So it's up on screen now if you want to look at it, Joyce. It's just a simple little,
Oh,
I don't know if you can
okay.
actually see it. I need to make it larger.
Okay, yeah.
You can just see. We'll just take another minute to write some notes and then we're going to move on to the second part of the process. So Joyce, in the book on pages, I think it's 41 to 43, depending on which book you're using, that's the summaries of each of the decades. So what you're missing is that they heard the summaries read, they took
Okay.
turns reading them, and they just wrote some notes in the decades on the bottom so they would know kind of what was happening during that time. So, so now they have some notes on the bottom, they have them on the timeline. And now we will, how are people doing? Are they almost done? Do you want to move on or need a little more time? Do you guys want to move on or do you need more time to write your notes, your journaling?
I'm finishing one sentence.
Okay, go ahead. Take
I'll
your
be
time.
ready. I
Yep.
don't let anybody else.
It's much harder in Zoom to figure out if people are done or not. That's one thing about it. So the next part of the process is, it can be challenging to do. So I just want to remind you that we're doing an experiential activity and the purpose of it is actually to connect us more with life. But often when we're considering things like dying, we get afraid and we push away. So we're actually connecting, part of the purpose of this is connecting even more deeply with this life. So for this one, maybe first just take a breath in. Let's take a deep breath in and just let it out. So I invite you to reflect on important loved ones in your life that are younger than you. These could be your children, grandchildren, children that you know and care about. And I want you to think of 2 to 6 younger people across different ages and generations. So I want you to actually try to, you could even write in the corner or on your journaling paper their names so that you can keep them in mind. So and these can include nieces, nephews, beings that you mentored or cared for or taught, or even an unborn children in your family. So come up with a short list of a number of young people kind of through the generations below your age. Just have a little list in mind from really younger ones to older ones. We're all more older, so they're going to be younger than us.
Mm.
Get your little list together. It's good if you have a couple, maybe 4 at least. So to ground this time, we're going to reflect, do something that we normally don't think about. We're actually going to reflect for each being when we think they may leave this life. When would they die? This is just it's not a prediction. It doesn't mean when it's going to happen, but just looking at a life, how long would that life last? Most likely, an average. And what you're going to do for each one is put their name on the top part of the timeline at the point in the timeline you imagine they will leave. So their names will be probably across some of the decades. If they're going to live beyond 2100, just put them at the end. So if it's a baby born today and you think they'll live 100 years, you can put them at the very end of the timeline. So do it very consciously for each person. And you could also draw something next to their name if you're visually oriented, like a symbol or something that reminds you of them. Just a very simple drawing. You don't want to get too far into drawing, but just something.
Should be 80.
So once you've put the names of the children or younger people than you on the timeline, then take a few moments to reflect again, looking at the timeline, what is being revealed in the timeline during their journey and their lifetime. What are the conditions that you see? So let yourself have this experience. It will not hurt your loved ones. It may be hard to think about, but please go ahead. And you can take a little time to write down some notes or journal your thoughts and feelings as they arise. And just be gentle with yourself and just look and see what you're seeing. So we'll just take a few moments for that to really reflect on it. It looks like some people are done and some are still writing. So what we want to do is some final reflections, kind of wrapping up, and we're going to write down some notes on just the whole process. And I know some people have come in during this, but just take some moments just to reflect on this whole process, putting yourself on the timeline, putting loved ones on the timeline, and looking at the decades ahead. What are the feelings that are coming up? What are the insights or reflections you might be having? And just noticing what's arising in you, your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And just kind of write some of those down. We'll be sharing with each other.
Hey, I'm on Zoom.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, that's fine.
But hi. Bless you.
So when you're doing with this, with the group, you'll probably ask everyone to, we're being informal because we're the facilitators, but you would want everyone to mute. And Joyce missed the instructions on how we set this up, so.
Nope. Uh-oh,
Oh, it's okay.
I lost you. Wait.
I was just saying that when you're leading the
Yeah.
group, when you guys lead it with the group, you'll want
Yeah.
everyone to mute themselves because everyone's in their own space. So it's less of, we're kind of creating a safe, sacred container. This is,
Yeah, I see. Yeah,
this is not an easy thing to do and we don't want to do it
Yeah.
mentally. We actually want to feel
Yeah.
the feelings.
yeah,
Is that's what awakens us to what's happening to our planet. But we don't want to look at it. So that's why we need to
right.
create this.
Yeah. No, it's a good exercise. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
And you guys might want to, prime them a little bit. I didn't give as much of an introduction and just say this can be challenging, but really let yourself go into it. Let yourself feel it fully. Because remember, we're all learning and it's kind of our collective intelligence that matters here.
Yeah, so it's a solitary exercise, right? I mean,
It's kind of a solitary why they're doing it. So when they're doing it, they're going to be quiet and not interact. It's not very
Yeah.
social. And then what you'll do is at the end, what I recommend is you put them in dyads. It doesn't say that on the flow chart, but I actually recommend you do that.
okay. I think that would be good as a way to debrief,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
So, yeah, so what we would do is at this point, you would ask them to, kind of come back to the group and pair them off probably in dyads so they have time to really talk and ask them just to share what was coming up for them. What were the feelings, were the ideas, the insights with one other person. So they have that intimacy of connection. Because if we just did the large group with a large group of people, most
Yeah.
people wouldn't say anything,
big.
right? So let them share with each other and give them, a good, maybe ask them to really make sure they hear from each other. You can either direct that fully by saying, take 4 minutes for one person and 4 minutes for the second, or just give them the time, but just say, make sure and we'll give you a warning like halfway, make sure the second
Yeah.
person got to speak.
Question just on logistics. So that would be the larger team like Jim and David signing people in dyads. That seems to be the way it works.
Is that Jim? How are you guys doing it? I'm not totally clear.
Last week, you guys put us in dyads, in twos, right?
Now you can do that before you're ready to start them, so you don't have to do us 2 at a time and keep looking and putting and looking and putting.
Yeah.
That
So
takes
yeah.
cuts out our time in the dyads. We're
Yeah,
smaller.
what I would do is like look ahead and when you're giving the warning or we're going to come back soon, in the script, there's kind of like you just say, okay, we'll take 1 more minute. Somebody should already be working on the dyads. And the only thing you have to look out for when you do the dyads is if you have 2 people on a screen, because that kind of throws it. If you do, don't put them in a dyad. Just they're going to have to do it with each other because otherwise there won't be enough time. So that's the one. Otherwise, it's really easy to do, but then you run into that problem with 2 people on a screen.
So my only question is, I think the only people that can do that are the host or the people orchestrating, right?
Yeah, if you make me a co-host, I can help you with it because I do that
feel
a
like we're
lot.
jumping way ahead to the logistics of the meeting when we were in the midst of trying to experience the exercise.
Yeah, it's true. We
I
are.
need a little
gotten a little
transition here before we jump straight to there.
Okay, so let's hold for a minute on all the logistics and just let all that go. And let's, as a community right here, especially for Evelyn, Dharma, and James, and then anyone else that also did a little bit of it, but those three have gone through the whole thing. And it was briefer because there's less of us. Why don't we're kind of acting out the dyads, but we'll just do it in a small group. And so how, first what I would say as the facilitator before we broke up into the dyads, because I'm thrown too, because I'm trying to catch everybody up. So what I would first say is when we all came back is just really thank everyone for holding the space and for being quiet, and being willing to consciously go through this exercise. It's quite unusual for anyone to do this in a group. And many of us have never considered when we're going to die in terms of a timeline, or considered when our loved ones are going to die or leave this life. So there are many layers to this process, and it brings up a lot of different things, even aside from what's happening in the world. But it also brings us into conscious awareness that we are all, going to die, and even our loved ones are. So that can also be a teaching that awakens us to this life. So we want to hear from you. And so the first part of the progression of sharing that you would direct them to share on is really to stay on the feelings. What feelings came up when you put yourself on there, when you heard the decades, and then particularly when you put the younger loved ones in your life on the timeline? What were some of the feelings and sensations, and if you even noticed anything in your body? So first, let's start with Dharma and Evelyn and James, because you guys did the whole thing. Can you, somebody want to raise their hand and share first? Dharma, you want to share? Yeah.
Well, the few things that went through my mind. One is, I mean, a little bit of worry about whether, just individually, whether I'll have the courage to, or how I would summon up the courage to make it through the times when they are getting even more and more severe, especially when you look at the 30s and 40s. At the end of the 40s is when I probably will be gone, but how I'm going to make it through. Yep. Then just very practical issues like how am I going to be a good steward with my finances so that I can make it through, because I imagine lots of stuff will be happening that's going to just totally upset everything, and you can't predict how things are going to go. And then also, I suppose a bit of worry or compassion for the younger ones, because most of them are going to outlast me. I mean, most of them, when they come to the age of awareness, I will already be dead, So, thinking about them in that manner. Yeah, so those were the feelings that went through my mind.
Thank you. Thank you. Evelyn, do you want to speak?
My experience of the exercise is that I didn't want to do it. I wanted to escape, and actually having the timeline there was helpful, because it was a way to refocus me on the information that's in the book, and that is the reality that we are facing in. And so I found that very helpful, to do the timeline, to have something to rationally pull me to be able to refocus. But in terms of feelings, I was almost panic stricken. I kept thinking, okay, so if this is really going to happen, and will communities be able to have water sources? Will they join together and create agrarian movements? Will they figure out self energizing pump systems? Will they, so I started thinking of all these different things to help solve issues if you were in a certain regional radius. And if you were in a desert-like condition, would you only be living next to the rivers and therefore you only have to dig 12 to 15 feet to get to the water table or not? So all these weird things came in my mind, and I thought I saw two examples of taking organic waste and making it into charcoal so that people could use those as a way of having warmth or energy. One was coffee, and the other one was just shavings from different types of organic trees or grass and stuff like that. And then they make that, they're doing that in the Congo. So I thought to myself, so if we know this is coming, we have the ability to figure out alternative ways to deal with each situation if you think
Okay.
about it long enough.
Okay, Evelyn, I probably should have been stronger on this, but we want you to stay for the first part, and maybe that would be something in the script that I'll emphasize too, because I haven't worked with you guys, so I'm a little thrown off doing it this way. Can you tell us how it was putting the younger people on the timeline? So first, what you want to do is try to keep them on feelings, try to keep them on the emotional part of it, because that's the part our culture doesn't want to go to. But there's a lot of richness there for us, and there's a lot of learning there. So, so I'm going to try to direct you there right now, just to tell us a little bit, just briefly, what were you feeling when you were putting the younger people on there?
I felt a great sorrow that we haven't looked at these issues before. And then I thought, and then I felt that we still need to have a way to talk about hope in the midst of this great adversity
Yes.
in order to help everyone think about not just themselves or their community, but the whole earth and all species and all people and all things. And so I started thinking about what are positive ways to communicate this so that I don't automatically go into a self-preservation mode of thinking and all these little details about water pumps and self-generating energy and things like that.
Okay, just you did really good. You stay with those feelings. Let's stay right there right now. I'm going to go over to James and we'll come back, because what I didn't lay out is first you want them to stay with the feelings, and I didn't lay that out very well, so you guys are getting all my mistakes. So you have to say it more than once, that really stay with the feelings. And it's hard if you're going to put them in dyads because you won't be there. So just remind them, and even send a reminder to them that we're not solving it. First, share the feelings, because we need that from each other too.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else felt it, but when Evelyn shared at the emotional level, I felt relief because I felt connected to her.
Yeah.
Because I feel that way. So that's why we got to stay with the feelings. And then what I didn't say, when you set it up, it's helpful to say, we will then look at, you know, what was coming up for us more conceptually and what were the thoughts and reflections we were having. But first try to get them to stay, because they just put themselves on a timeline. Then they put these children. We don't do this in our lives. So there's a lot there, and we want to stay with that juiciness. So let's go over to James for a minute and we'll come back around. So James, can you share a little bit from the feeling side?
I came into this having gone to Walmart to buy something and they didn't have it. It was out of stock. And so I've been walking around with this vague uneasiness. How will I live in a world where I can't go get what I want right away in the store? So that was kind of in the background.
Yep.
Then as I did this, I put I guess great-granddaughter Ella is turning 1 this weekend. So she's gonna die in 2110. So that was way on the far side of the timeline, and she's gonna be really young going through all this. And then, well, push me if this isn't feeling. Then I put her mother, a couple of grandchildren, my daughter, when they were all going to die. And as I did that, how do I describe this? I took the burden of this and laid it down. I don't know how to say that. And it was like,
Yeah.
we're all gonna, and I wrote down, all will die early or live through this time. Because then I didn't know when, human life would just end in this period of time.
Yeah, that's very insightful.
I don't know if it's feeling, but then there's a song we used to sing, burdens down, Lord, burdens down, Lord, if I lay my burdens down. And part of it was I found myself, it's like I want to hold on to a way of living that I'm cynical about.
Yeah.
And I want to hold on to a dread about the future like it's my precious secret that makes me somehow special or noble. And then I was thinking, I will never, I am robbed of the opportunity of being a wise elder, because neither me nor Ella, nor Hazel, nor Jenny, nor any of us has a leg up on how to live this next 50 years.
Thank you. I don't want to say too much because I'm facilitating, but we're all going to learn, James. And so I don't think you're going to get robbed of that. Actually, I think everyone showing up here is going to be part of the wisdom. So, and thank you for saying
precisely. I was thinking I could have a special wisdom, but I don't.
Well, the only way to do it is to face it. And what you said about the burden is we're afraid to face it. But when we do, just like we have to face our own death at some point, it opens something up. There's a great teacher that said, when we face the nevers, I'll never maybe see my grandchildren get married, whatever it is. I'll never wear a bikini again. I'll never do that thing I wanted to do. But when we face those, it really creates a space, and in that space something new actually arises. And so that's part of what we're doing here, is we're facing everybody else has some inkling of this, but we're doing it head on, and it feels very strange to do it, but it creates a space. So, but I'd like to hear from Joyce and Sunny just briefly, so we have time to wrap up the rest of this. Do you guys have any reflections on the feeling side of it?
Yeah, I'm thinking of grandchildren. I have I have a grandson who is 12 and extremely talented golfer, and he wants to spend his life being a professional golfer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe there will be golf courses for him by even 2030 or 2035, which is when he'll come of age.
Yeah.
And just, having grandkids who are young and have dreams, and you can see what their dreams are, I start to see that. And realizing how hard it's going to be for them to just have I guess what we have called normal life,
Mm-hmm.
where you're carefree a bit and feel safe in raising your children, and feel like, you don't even think about where's the next water coming from or where's the next food coming from.
Mm-hmm.
That we've had those privileges of not having to worry. There's two real little people in our family. They're both just turning one. One turned 1 year old last week. She's in Ghana. Her name is Joyce Lynn Pierce.
Mm.
So she is named after Louis and I. She's African, and she turned 1. And I had to put her on the timeline. And I was like, well, in Africa, how's that going to be? How people going to have normal life ranges? Well, what about here? I mean, it just took me into everything.
Yeah.
And then little Leslie, who's turning 1 on the 2nd of July, which is in about a week or so. She's my nephew's daughter, so I'm a great auntie to her. And again, her life is going to be just totally different than I 3 weeks ago was thinking it was going to be.
Yeah.
Before I really got into looking ahead like we are. And it's very hard. It's very sad. It's very, you wish them, I'm sure they will rally and pull their strength forward, just like any of us will try and do. But somebody said, you wonder how you are going to have the strength to get through the really hard, low, really rough times of the 2040s. 2040s sound terrible to me, really, really terrible.
Yep.
It's very sobering and very, same as what other people say. You don't want to face it. I don't want to face it. I just made a decision this past week, about a week ago, to not give this book yet to my daughter, because I need to find some kind of connecting way to do this with her and not just give her the book.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's going on for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and we do need to give ourselves time to digest all this.
Mhm.
So taking your time. So let's hear just briefly from Sunny, and then we're going to move on so I can walk you guys through this.
Well, I came in when you just started putting names on the timeline. So I did that first. And then as there was a little bit more time, I went back and put the names on the different, when I realized you'd read those different paragraphs,
Mm-hmm.
I went back and put the names on them. And I've always thought I'd live to at least 100, which would be 2046.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about how crappy that's going to be for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the level of sorrow and loss of knowing I won't be there for the rest of them, likely. And I might not even make it that far, given what's going on before. And I wonder if they will. And the next feeling was one of serious urgency.
Mhm.
Like, I gotta do something way bigger than I'm already doing.
Mhm.
And then I got to I did like how Jim put it. They'll either die early during the awfulness, or they'll make it through it. You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
But I also find myself having a little bit of pride in that, knowing that they are the kind of people who will tackle
Mhm.
issues strongly.
Mhm.
I mean, my granddaughter's 24. She's the youngest of the ones on my list at the moment. And she already wants to do a tiny house village for the homeless
Mhm.
and study green build architecture and go in that direction. She's a real compassionate person. One of them's a hospice nurse, one of my daughters. And I just know that they're going to be in the middle of doing something that's, it didn't lessen the sorrow much.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's good to feel their resilience, you know, feel their capacities. Yeah.
That helped, yeah, a little.
So again, we're doing it in the large group, but probably you're going to want to break people up into dyads so that when they come back, they would have had this conversation a bit. You know, and you might want to send them, whoever's doing the dyads, like little reminder notes to make sure they're focusing on feelings, reminding them. And then when they come back, have them share with the group. But, you know, keeping it short, sharing some of the feelings that came up. Because part of what we're also getting is our humanness. You know, we're all in this and we have some of the same
Mixed
feelings and
together.
concerns and, you know.
Will they be coming back into our small groups from their dyads?
I don't know, James just
For-
stepped
for
out,
just-
what you
yeah.
guys have planned, so that's something you're gonna have to
Okay.
figure out.
Okay,
If he comes back, maybe we can ask him that.
yeah,
Probably give us time to share more feelings
I think
with
it
each
would.
other at
I
that
think it
point.
would be good.
Yeah, because there's kind of two levels. One is the intimacy of one other person, and then there could be another level of intimacy with the groups. James, have you guys thought through, we were just talking about when, you know, first you would put them in dyads and they would do in a sense what we did, and you'll need to be reminding them, maybe sending a little note through the broadcast, like to really try to stay with the feelings. And then you'd bring them back and you'd probably want to have some sharing, and that would be in their groups or.
I, no, we haven't had that conversation. I mean,
Okay.
that's why it's good to do this.
Mhm.
But I'm understanding in the old procedures, we did that journaling on what is coming up, and then inquiry 4.2 was the large group discussion, which now you're saying would be best, it would be dyads.
I would do dyads first. We had done it in the
And
large
maybe
group.
something to the whole group.
And then to this whole group, because one of the things that we've learned is that the part, you know, it's one thing to put ourselves on there and all that, but actually it is the younger people that for most people has a lot of what was expressed here, our feelings and sorrows, and that's what people really need to be able to speak to. And it's good to have the dyad and then to share that in the large group.
Before we get into that, just a question. In the midst of this process, I looked at the timeline and I thought about 2076,
Mm-hmm.
which would technically be the tricentennial of the United States,
Mhm.
at least of the, you know, the revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found myself thinking, is that going to live, or is that going to still be alive then?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I thought to myself that, you know, we jump from the whole world to our children and grandchildren. And I began to think about what would it be like to ask the question of what's precious to you in a little broader context?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Institute of Cultural Affairs. Well, will it be there?
Yeah.
The Lutheran Church, will it be there? Tallis in Arizona, will it be there? So much of this is not,
Yeah.
so much of this is pressure on our collective existence, which
Yeah.
takes place
Yeah.
through these,
Yeah.
you know, what about Apple Computer? God, what would happen if Apple Computer went away?
Well, that's one thing you could do. You could do it first the way we just did it, share the feelings, go into the groups and share that, and then you could do a more collective question. There's room for you guys to be creative here. And because something is dying, right? A part of our culture is dying, part of industrial civilization, but not everything's going to die because we're going to be here. So to some degree, right? And
Plus,
so
dying is absolutely natural. I mean, that's the other thing.
dying is natural. And so it's, in a way, what we're doing is we're acknowledging it. It's part of it. You know, our death is, and everything comes to an end. Everything has its cycle. But we know that this will push the end of certain things in our culture. You named one, Jim, just the fact that, especially in Western culture, we can just go to a store and get what we need. And the pandemic has kind of shooken that up. And we know with this kind of disturbance that will be more of an issue. And that's a little death for us. We've all had those conveniences.
Yeah.
We know it's there. If we need a medicine, we know the medicine's available. It may or may not be available. We don't know.
I was thinking to myself, move to Nicaragua, rather than staying here, and the degree to which all this is going to fall. Move someplace where everyday life is already a lot closer to what the future is going to be. But well, anyway, I don't. But that reminded me also, Dharma, after our first session, put a little comment about, well, this is all wonderful, but it's still the arrogance of the human species. That's the most important thing, is how are we going to survive? And what is it going to take for us to get over being, thinking of ourselves as the really special thing? Anyway.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it.
I agree.
So back on the question. I would, in my mind, I would dearly love that we do the first part of this in our breakout rooms, and then have a way for the breakout rooms to go into dyads and then come back. However, I have no idea how that could be possible on Zoom to do that.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
We did it last week.
No, we didn't.
Didn't we do?
We came back to the whole group. We came back to the whole group. And then the other little bit of complexity is, so this is a question of what's the best way to do this. We could do this timeline exercise as a whole group. Just tell people to mute and give instruction and let them go and watch it happen and so forth and so on. Or we could do that in our breakout rooms. I'm concerned. I think what I'm concerned about is the human connection a little bit here. And then because to me, if you're in that breakout and you break and it's somebody you've been talking to, you're not starting from scratch. There's a little bit of depth of a conversation. Whereas the only way I would know to break us into dyads, which is what we did last week, is you just do the random assignment of people, and then you end up with somebody maybe you hadn't talked to before, and there's not much control like what Coleen did in terms of keeping us focused at the feeling level, and at least watching the videos of the small groups from last time. When we got into the small groups, we went every which way. There wasn't much strong connection to the procedures, because the tendency is for some person sort of says something and then we all try to be nice and off we go. So what is y'all thinking about the best way to do this? And then if we come up with that, then we're going to need some help from Sunny and others who understand Zoom to figure out what would be the best way to do it.
I have a little bit different thought about how you could do it. See what you think of this. You could do the timeline work in the big group and ask everybody to mute. So they're doing it individually, but you're spaced in the big group. And then rather than doing dyads, be put into your small group where you debrief and people, I mean, if our groups are small enough, it seems to me that people are real, or, you know, it's,
Mhm.
I think it feels pretty safe to be who we are.
Mhm.
And so that there would be, the advantage of that is there would be several listeners, several people hearing you,
Mhm.
and you hearing several people.
And they're about this size, aren't they?
And it would build, I think, in a way, more connection.
Mhm.
So that's just a thought.
And so, I think Sandy probably knows this. You can, if you have lists of people and which groups they're in, you can actually plug that in. You know, there's a way to do
Yeah.
it in Zoom to preset it so you put everyone
Yeah.
in their group. So
That
that's,
preset last week took 4 minutes and 28 seconds. I think because most people do not have a Zoom account.
That doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because we're on somebody else's Zoom and they do have.
Okay, all I'm saying is we set it up
Yeah.
to do the automatic pre-assignment.
hmm.
And
Oh,
what happened was 2/3 of the people didn't get a pre-assignment and had to do it individually. So Sunny,
You have to do it after you're on the call,
we can work
Okay.
on that.
not before the call.
Yeah, do it after.
but
the-
anyway, that was just a thought.
Okay, that's okay. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I had a comment on this kind of going back a little bit on the timeline,
Mhm.
Mhm.
putting the death of our loved ones.
Mhm.
And it just struck me in terms of evoking the feelings. What would it do if, in addition to the death of the loved ones, we put in the death of some species that we feel strongly about?
That's beautiful.
You know, if it's an
Mhm.
elephant or a dolphin or whatever, I'm just thinking what it does to our imagination.
Yes.
Because when you look at the death of members of our own species, then you still limit it in one dimension, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Whereas this really, I mean, because there are feelings still involved here,
Mhm.
but it opens us up in a broader way. I don't know whether it works, whether
Yeah.
people have some passions about certain things. I mean, over the last few weeks, watching all those elephants take that walk across China, I've gotten more
Oh,
Yes.
of a tie to the elephants. You know, now if I could put when they are going to be
Gone.
extinct,
Mhm.
and that would really make this what's happening to the planet
Yeah.
more real in another way.
More holistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need to experience. We do need to experience more than just, you know.
Yes. Our own.
Our
I'm with you. This actually came
Mm-hmm.
out of a workshop where we do a whole ceremony on what you're talking about, where everybody brings a species or something in nature that they love. And it's kind of a grieving ritual of letting go and naming what is going to be lost. And so you're bringing it into this. I think it's a great idea. You guys could just add that by saying after the children to add one more level and say, think about something that you love in nature and animals. It could be the redwoods, you know, here.
Plants, yeah.
There's so
could
many
be.
things that are going to be lost. I know there's a race right now to move a lot of trees north because of what's happening. So, you know, have them think of something and then just, they don't have to know when it's going to happen, but just imagine and put on there when they think the loss of that would be. The Great Barrier Reef, that's, you know, there are big things and small things.
Yeah.
So I love your idea. I think it's a huge addition. We're going to use that. Like I said, we had an activity when we did the workshops that had that kind of bringing in all the species and the plants and animals. But it does need to be brought into here. It's a really good insight, Dharma. So let's do it.
A question. What about lift?
Lift. Well, right here, you're not doing the lift part so much because remember, we're in the scenario for 2 sessions. You did the first one. This is the second. Then we start turning that way. So this will be the last thing. It's hard, but it's the last thing of looking at the kind of crash and collapse in a way. And then we're going to turn into the opportunities. Yeah.
So
If you
any
have an
other thoughts?
idea of how to bring it in, James, you know, maybe, I don't know, it depends on time. Like we've taken up quite a bit of time just processing it. And I think people, what I've learned, you know, we did this face to face when we first did it. And then because of COVID, we've had to do them online. It's a little bit harder and people need a little more time to do it in a way to sink into it. And so I think you're going to need a lot of your time just to share what the experience was for people. But I think adding what Dharma said is almost, that's crucial. I'm sorry we didn't even notice that.
That's really good.
I would absolutely add it. So, because all the species of plants and animals and everything else, and large things like reefs, and you know, that has to be brought in. So
We've gone about an hour and a half, and I appreciate this. I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
drawing this to close. So what are we recommending? What seems wise, or what steps do we need to take between now and Monday so that we're all set? Joyce's recommendation, we have somebody walk us through the process, do the process in the whole group, and then break into our breakout rooms to do the sharing, or break into dyads in some good way for that part. What's your wisdom on this? You know? Okay, no wisdom on that one.
Well, the breakout rooms would be a lot easier
yeah,
because I like the idea of keeping people together who've been together,
Yeah, I like that.
strengthening
Yes.
that.
sounds like that would be deeper.
Yeah, the other thing is, it seems to me we've been creating a bit of a safe container with our small groups, and
Mhm.
that, you know, I sort of vote for keeping going in that direction. I don't know how, I think this coming session is probably going to be, I don't know, I haven't read the whole book, but I think this is going to be probably the hardest emotionally, the hardest one. And
Well,
I
that
think
week was pretty hard.
people, yeah,
This made this whole
well,
week.
they're all hard, but this one's going to be darn hard. Oh.
Well, compared to the 2040s, it's real easy, let me tell you. I understand the 2040s.
This one includes the 2040s. That's about what I'm
So why would we not start off and then go into our why would we not start off and then go into our breakout teams, do the exercise, and then reflect on it and give ourselves the time there? Or would it dramatically make more sense to do the exercise with someone walking us through all together and then go into our teams for the reflection?
I like the second one, but I would, either one I think could work.
Anybody else? Evelyn, what's your sense?
I think that as a whole group, if we all do the timeline together, it helps to give you space and distance. And then when you go into the small group, you can focus more on the feeling. And what that means is that as a big group, you're dealing with your rational side. And then when you go to your small group, you're building your emotional group safety. And then that way you can continue to build on the small team to be a safe place to talk and share. I don't know if we need to do pairs or dyads or whole team, but that's really my question to the group. Do you want to stay as a whole group to share the feelings, or do you want to partner with someone and share together? And then is it possible to come back to your small team and share with your small team? and then go back to the big group?
Yeah, I would prefer the latter, but my worry is the logistics and the practice of it, because I don't know how I would break up into dyads from my breakout group.
Right.
I don't know if I.
Right.
Were we supposed to note down feelings as we were working on this?
Yes.
Okay, I missed that instruction. I might have been a little closer to it. I did them after I'd done the timeline stuff.
It
Well,
sounds like
while
the small group-
we were reading it, when we were individually quiet, we were asked to write down your feelings and
Mhm.
things that came up. So
Okay.
it was specifically
It was seated.
repeated. It was
Yeah.
seated before you get to a small group.
Back to the dyads, I suppose the other option is what we had mentioned some time ago of using the chat function and operate in dyads while still in the breakout rooms.
Oh,
Mhm.
It wouldn't be so good, but it would at least touch that aspect of it.
Hmm.
So if I'm hearing right, we're thinking the direction of doing the timeline exercise as a whole group with one person guiding through that.
Mhm.
And then breaking into our breakout rooms.
Mhm.
our
And-
teams.
our
Yeah,
teams. And now the question is, in the teams, do we need to go into dyads? I'm feeling like we wouldn't need the dyads. I'm feeling
I
like
am too.
Yeah.
I don't think we
having
need
been in
them.
the big group, having been in the big group, number one, it means the group facilitators aren't worn out from trying to keep the timeline thing going. So you're there and you're fresh and ready to play kind of the role that Coleen was playing of keeping people focused and on point with this. And I think we're going to have to also a little bit be directive, keep focused on feeling, keep the pace slow.
Mhm.
Colleen was very directive in terms of Evelyn, share a little bit, Dharma, share a little bit, and not just throwing it open. Would that kind of do it?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And then
One thing
Sunny, if you can show me how that CSV pre-assignment thing can work for us in less than
Well,
5 minutes and 20 seconds, but we can do that offline.
yeah, or just make me a co-host and I can help you.
All right.
Yeah, Jim, the other thing I'm just thinking of groups that I've led, therapy groups, counseling groups, those kind of things. There's something about a number of people in, but it has to be a pretty small group, like not a big group. So like 6 people or some such, where people see each other and hear each other and you never know who bounces off of who, but people that have a hard time accessing will hear somebody say something and then they can open up.
Mhm.
And you can't predict that at all, but it seems to work good in a smaller group of 5, 6, 7. Whereas, and I think dyads are great too, but I don't think we really need them. I think there's a plus in having several people hear you out and you hearing several people out and
Mhm.
relating it back to your own emotional deep stuff. I think that's what I see.
I agree with you, Joyce. Just with our process, just so you know, our groups are smaller. So the dyads, they get to know each other pretty well. So the dyads, it's kind of a different function. In your group, it does sound like the small groups would work much better. That to me makes a lot of sense. And also avoids some of the technical challenges of, going further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I just want to mention, it is getting late and I'm going to have to get off, but I just want to mention at the very end of it, before you go into your preparation for next session, you might want one of you pick somebody, whether it's each facilitator in the small group, or if you come back into the large group, it would be good to just encourage people that, you know, we really went into some territory here. And so this week, just be, you know, gentle with yourself and be aware of how you're feeling. The homework is going to be to put the timeline up somewhere. That's why one of the reasons we suggested the drawing. Or if you're uncomfortable putting it up, because maybe you're in a household with kids that would see it and you're not ready to share it with them, just put it in a drawer and take it out every once in a while and let it live in you without having to think about it a whole lot. That's the homework. And so you're just going to want to encourage them a little too, to take care of themselves and, you know, self-care.
Yeah.
And be aware that they opened up something. But that opening also can be a gift. So don't forget that side of it. You know, this is not to just get us worried. This is to open up some space in us
Yeah.
where we can let it, you know, let it be,
Uh-huh.
set it down, as Jim said, you know. So
Let it be. Yeah.
So we need to think who would do that with the whole group. Several of you here don't have a co-facilitator, I know. David or I could do it, or we could, maybe Sunny, that might be something Sunny could do. We need to think about that. And then we're getting the script you read from.
yes, I'm going to email it right now.
Okay, and so then we can, we'll make this recording available in the script, and then we'll design it so that it's in the whole group, and then that inquiry too will go into our breakout rooms, our teams for that. And then do we need to come back to the whole group and have reports or speeches, or just close with the assignment?
Yeah, I mean, you could pull people back together just to get this, whoever's doing this, sort of this closing or send out kind of thing. Right? I mean,
Jan Eames is doing that.
there's usually somebody doing a closing thought or something. But other than that, we don't really need it that much.
Just so long as we're clear that you get your next assignment in the small
Yeah.
groups if we're not getting it in the big group this time.
Yeah, I think it would be good to come back all together at the end and hear the send out, if you will, or the closing meditation, and clarify the assignment so everybody's on the same page about it.
All right, Sunny just said make the assignment in the small group and come back for the dedication. And
Well,
said yes.
I don't care which way. We just need every group to know which it is.
Yeah, right.
Because that was confusing the first time I came to a session.
Okay. So go with Joyce's, come back, do the assignment for the next week with the whole group, and then the end.
And then the send out.
And then
Yeah.
the send out, yeah.
All right. Thank you all. I think we're done.
Great.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Can we sneak Dharma's question into the, can you just put it in the script so that you can use it anyway, Coleen?
Yeah, I'm going to add it in right now so you can decide.
Yeah.
I can see,
Very
there's Dwayne behind you. He's
Good,
really curious
I
now.
don't even say hi here.
Dwayne.
Say hi. Where are you?
Greetings to all. I've heard a bit of your conversation and I have huge respect for the inquiry you're going into. Thank you for the courage and the love that you're bringing to it.
Yeah.
I had his.
By the way, we are picking out our grave plots tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I mean, it just so happened. I like, who knew? But yeah. Thanks.
So
Serendipity.
Joyce, take a couple of pictures while you're doing that and send them around to the group.
Right.
All right.
I still have to send you the Greek restaurant pictures.
Sunny, I'll send you an email and we'll get a conversation going on picking the teams. Thanks.
All
Okay.
right.
All
Take
right.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks
Monday.
for coming. Good to be with you all.
Bye.
Early on Monday, right? 7:15, right? Something like that?
David, it'll
Central.
go at 7 o'clock.
I made that up.
All right.
I saw your thing that said 7:30 Central for tonight, and I didn't come till 6:30 Mountain, so sorry about that. All right. See you Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, we don't want to leave each other, do